In a galaxy scarred by war, Cryon the Starbreaker was unstoppable. His flames melted fleets, his wings shadowed worlds. Until Tira, a fearless scavenger girl, pulled a poisoned barb from his snout on a desolate moon. Now, the deadliest dragon guards a child, their bond a spark that defies an empire. Her words echo through the stars. You're not a weapon, you're my friend. The galaxy quaked when Cryon descended. His scales, forged in the molten hearts of dying stars, gleamed harder than durasteel, impervious to even the ascendancy's most advanced weapons. His breath, a torrent of plasma, could reduce battle cruisers to molten slag, and his wings, spanning kilometers, had once fractured the crust of Clithar's third moon, sending tremors through entire systems. Cryon was the apex predator of the Orion Expanse, a creature born from cosmic firestorms, a living myth whose roar silenced stars. The Ascendancy, a sprawling empire of iron will and relentless ambition, had created Cryon in their clandestine forges on Valthor Prime, intending to wield him as the ultimate weapon. They grafted neural collars and synaptic relays to bind his mind, but their technology was no match for his primal fury. The collars shattered under his first roar, and the forges burned to ash as he tore free, leaving a trail of destruction across the expanse. For a decade, Cryon became a force of chaos, annihilating fleets and outposts with no allegiance, no mercy, only fire. Yet even titans can suffer. During a rampage through the Valthor Armada's outer defenses, a cryobarb, a venom-laced harpoon forged from neurotoxic alloys, pierced Cryon's snout. The barb, designed to cripple even the mightiest bioengineered creatures, lodged deep in his nostril, its toxins searing his blood and clouding his senses. Pain became his world, disrupting his equilibrium and driving him to madness. He roared. Across 4 systems, obliterating asteroid mines and orbital relays in a blind frenzy, until he crashed onto Elira's Veil, a forgotten moon littered with the ruins of a long-abandoned colony. In a crater of scorched rock and twisted metal, Cryon writhed, his massive frame shuddering with each labored breath. The toxin burned through his nerves, dimming his golden eyes and twisting his roars into groans of torment. The galaxy's deadliest creature lay broken, alone, his fire dimmed by agony. He might have died there, unremembered, had it not been. For her, Tira, a 9-year-old scavenger girl, roamed the moon's desolate plains with her family, salvaging scraps from forgotten tech to survive. Barefoot, with tangled black hair and eyes bright with unyielding curiosity, she carried a battered multi-tool, a cracked holo-recorder, and a stubborn streak that baffled her clan. While her parents scavenged the colony's core, Tira wandered the cliffs, drawn by a low seismic rumble that shook the ground. Peering over the edge, she saw Cryon, a mountain of scales and flame, his blood pooling beneath a black, pulsing barb in his snout. Most would have fled. Tira climbed down, her small frame slipping between jagged rocks, her flashlight casting frail beams across the dragon's heaving form. Cryon's eyes cracked open, clouded with pain, and fixed on her. Steam hissed from his throat, but he didn't move. Tira stepped closer, unafraid, her voice soft but clear. "That looks like it really hurts." She stood on tiptoe, inspecting the barb. Her multi-tool hummed as she gripped its base, her hands slipping twice on the slick venom. On the 3rd try, she braced her feet against a rock, gritted her teeth, and yanked. The barb snapped free, its toxin sizzling on the ground. Cryon exhaled, a guttural rumble that sent a shockwave of dust and debris rolling outward, shaking the crater's walls. His massive frame relaxed, the torment easing as his eyes cleared, their golden glow returning. Tira stumbled back, clutching the barb like a hard-won prize. Cryon lifted his head, his gaze locking onto her, not with the hunger of a predator, but with something deeper, something no data log could name. He could have incinerated her in an instant, yet he lowered his snout to the ground, exhaling a warm breath that ruffled her hair like a hearth's glow. "You're welcome," Tira said, patting his scales with a small, calloused hand. Cryon blinked, his wings folding slowly, and then, in a gesture that defied the galaxy's logic, he curled a massive claw around her, shielding her from the moon's biting cold. It wasn't submission or dominance. It was trust, born from a single act of compassion. High above, Ascendancy satellites captured the impossible. The Starbreaker, terror of worlds, curled protectively around a human child. Command channels erupted in panic. Analysts scrambled, unable to process the data. The creature engineered for annihilation had formed a bond, defying every protocol. High Executor Varn, a cold strategist with eyes like polished obsidian, issued a decree from the Ascendancy's War Council. Deploy containment fleets, arm singularity warheads, prepare to glass Elira's veil if necessary. The first dreadnought entered the moon's orbit, its sensors trained on the crater. But it found no cowering child or wounded beast. Creon stood tall, his scales gleaming under the faint light of Elira's veil, his eyes sharp as plasma blades. Tira sat atop his head, legs swinging between his horns, waving cheerfully at the ship's viewport. The commander's hail crackled through, demanding surrender. Cryon's response was a breath of emerald fire that ignited the atmosphere, vaporizing the ship's prow. It wasn't rage. It was a warning. Tira tapped his scales, her voice light but firm. "We're not done exploring yet." Cryon launched into the sky, Tira clinging to his horns, her laughter echoing as they soared. The Ascendancy realized, too late, that they faced not just a dragon, but a protector with a purpose, a child who had turned their weapon into her guardian. Cryon's wings sliced through Elira's veil's thin atmosphere, each thunderous beat sending tremors across the moon's surface. Tira clung to a ridge of his scales, her tangled hair snapping in the wind, her eyes wide with wonder. The stars stretched out like an endless tapestry, and for the first time in centuries, Cryon flew not to destroy, but to explore. His movements were fluid, almost playful, as if seeing the galaxy anew through Tira's fearless gaze. She laughed at each dive and spin, her trust in him absolute, her small hands gripping his scales as if they were her home. With every peal of her joy, something ancient in Cryon shifted. A knot of rage, forged in the Ascendancy's labs, began to unravel. His fire, once a weapon of annihilation, now burned to shield the fragile spark atop his crown. They landed on a derelict orbital platform, its rusted frame a relic of a failed mining colony. Tira slid down Cryon's horn, her boots clanging against the metal as she explored, giggling at the echoes of her footsteps. Below, Ascendancy analysts watched in stunned silence, their screens filled with grainy footage of the girl and dragon. They dubbed her the Ember Child, a name whispered with dread and fascination across encrypted channels. To the Ascendancy, this bond was a glitch, a threat to their dominion over the expanse. High Executor Varn convened the War Council, his voice cold as he issued orders. Capture the girl, break the beast's will. The first wave of interceptors reached the Drenvar belt, where Cryon had taken Tira to see the crystal spires, frozen, arcs of ice linking floating asteroids, glinting like diamonds under distant stars. The ships, sleek and insect-like, deployed gravnets to snare Cryon's wings and stasis fields to halt his flight. But Cryon didn't flee. He let them close in, his eyes narrowing to slits. Then he unleashed a pulse of radiant blue light, not fire, but a defensive surge that overloaded their systems. The lead ship disintegrated in a silent flash, and the others scattered, some crashing into the asteroids, others detonating as their own weapons misfired. Tira hugged Cryon's snout, her voice soft but fierce. "You kept us safe." He rumbled, a sound of agreement, not conquest. Their bond was no program or leash. It was a promise, forged in a moment of kindness on a broken moon. Word of their alliance spread like wildfire through the expanse. On trade stations and colony worlds, stories of the Ember Child and her dragon multiplied. On Zelthar Prime, a mining outpost plagued by raiders, Tira helped repair their water purifiers, sharing scavenged tools from her pouch while Cryon stood guard, his presence a wall of fire and scale. The raiders fled without a shot fired, and the miners lit beacons in the shape of barbs, a silent tribute to the girl who tamed a god. Tira's clan, still scavenging on Elira's Vale, heard the tales through salvaged comms. Her mother, Kalia, a wiry engineer with calloused hands, wept with pride and fear, knowing her daughter had become something greater than their hard-scrabble life. Her father, Thorn, a grizzled navigator, began spreading word among other scavengers, calling Tira a beacon of hope against the Ascendancy's tyranny, but the Ascendancy adapted. Brute force had failed, so they turned to deception. On the colony of Myrath, they seeded false distress signals, broadcasting cries of stranded families and dying children. Tira, her heart open as always, urged Cryon to descend. He circled warily, sensing a trap, but trusted her instinct. As Tira landed to help, electromagnetic nets sprang from hidden turrets, and cryobolts lanced through the air. She screamed, not for herself, but for Cryon. He plummeted from the sky, his claws shredding turrets, his flames melting nets to slag. The false refugees, Ascendancy operatives in disguise, fled, their ruse exposed. Cryon stood over Tira as she rose, dust-covered but unharmed, his growl shaking the colony's foundations. "They don't understand," Tira said, brushing dirt from her knees. "You're my friend." Cryon launched into the stars, Tira clinging to his horns, her laughter defiant against the Ascendancy's schemes. Their journey became legend. Graffiti of a girl and dragon appeared on station walls, etched in plasma and hope. The Ascendancy's denials were drowned out by whispers of the Ember Child, a girl who turned their greatest weapon into her protector. Tira and Cryon roamed the expanse, free and untamed. They visited forgotten libraries on asteroid outposts, where Tira pored over ancient data cores, her multi-tool coaxing life from broken circuits. They watched nebulae bloom from the ruins of derelict war hulks, Tira's eyes wide with wonder as Cryon's wings cast shadows across the void. She collected trinkets, cracked lenses, melted toys, discarded power cells, and fixed them with care, her hands steady with purpose. Cryon watched, his golden eyes soft with a reverence that outshone his ancient fury. On the trade moon of Calyx, Tira shared her scavenged food with orphaned children, teaching them to repair drones while Cryon loomed outside, his presence silencing pirates. The children crafted pendants from scrap metal, shaped like barbs, and hung them around their tents. Across the expanse, these symbols spread, barbs and flames, etched on hulls and carved into stone, a quiet rebellion against the Ascendancy's iron grip. But the Ascendancy's patience frayed. Their fleets had failed, their traps had burned, and their propaganda couldn't quell the growing myth of the Ember Child. High Executor Varn convened a shadow council in the depths of Valthor Prime, their voices hushed as they devised a new plan. The Black Veil, a synthetic storm woven from collapsed stellar cores and neural disruptors. It wasn't designed to kill Cryon, but to tear Tira from his side, severing their bond. The veil opened over the moons of Tyros IV, a roiling maelstrom of temporal distortion and electromagnetic chaos. Tira and Cryon were soaring through the system, Tira laughing as Cryon spun through a gravity well when the storm erupted. A spatial rift swallowed Tira, her scream cut off by static as she vanished. Cryon froze mid-flight, his wings locking, his roar shaking the stars as rage consumed him. He dove into the veil, ignoring the magnetic snares and temporal folds that warped reality around him. The Ascendancy's scientists, watching from a cloaked, orbital platform, believed their trap infallible. They were wrong. Cryon's roar became a song, an ancient, resonant hum that echoed through the void, shattering the containment field around Tira. She fell into his claws, waking with a gasp, her eyes dazed but unafraid. "You found me," she murmured, pressing her hand to his snout. Cryon's flames licked harmlessly around her, a protective halo, before he turned the veil to ash, its remnants a glowing scar across the sky. The galaxy shifted that day. Free. Worlds, scavengers, and even rogue Ascendancy pilots began to rally, not for war, but for belief in a girl and her dragon. Tira's clan, now nomadic across the expanse, spread her story, their salvaged comms broadcasting tales of the Ember Child to every corner of the stars. The Ascendancy, desperate to reclaim control, activated Project Eclipta, a creature named Scythe, engineered as Cryon's mirror. Where Cryon burned with fire, Scythe froze with cryogenic mist. Where Cryon chose his path, Scythe obeyed without question, its neural relays hardwired to the Ascendancy's will. They met above the shattered rings of Vorin, a broken world of jagged crystal and floating debris. The Ascendancy broadcast ultimatums across every channel: surrender the girl, or die. Tira stood between the dragons, her small frame dwarfed but unafraid. "You were made to destroy him," she said to Scythe, her voice steady. "But you can choose something else." Time seemed to pause. Scythe's eyes, cold as liquid nitrogen, blinked once. Then it turned, not on Cryon, but on the Ascendancy's fleet, its frost-shattered hulls, and Cryon's fire melted what remained. Together they tore through the ships, not as rivals, but as allies freed by a child's words. Tira stood untouched, her shadow cast by fire and frost. "We choose our story," she whispered. Cryon knelt, and Scythe followed, its obedience broken by a spark of will. The destruction of the Ascendancy's fleet at Vorin marked a turning point. Tira, Cryon, and Scythe became a symbol of defiance, their bond a story no empire could silence. They roamed the expanse, Tira teaching rescued children to rebuild machines and share kindness, while the dragons stood guard. Cryon's fire warmed. The nights, Scythe's frost cooled the days, and their sanctuary, a reforged carrier ship named Haven's Spark, became a beacon for the lost and broken. Tira's clan joined her, their salvaging skills turning Haven's Spark into a thriving hub. Kalia, Tira's mother, engineered solar arrays to power the ship, while Thorn mapped safe routes through Ascendancy-controlled space. The children Tira rescued, many orphaned by the Ascendancy's wars, learned to repair drones and grow hydroponic gardens, their laughter filling the ship's corridors. Cryon and Scythe, once weapons, became protectors, their presence a promise that power could serve, not destroy. But the Ascendancy's remnants refused to fade. From the hollow moons of Zyros, they unearthed the Chronovoid engine, a relic of the old empire designed to unravel time itself. Its purpose was not to kill, but to erase the moment Tira pulled the cryo-barb from Cryon's snout, undoing their bond and restoring his rage. The engine's singularity core, primed from a dead star's heart, pulsed with the power to rewrite reality. Tira woke one night, a piercing headache dropping her to her knees. Cryon stirred, his scales bristling as he sensed the temporal tremor. Scythe stood at the ship's viewport, his frost clouding the glass. "They're erasing your beginning," he said, his voice like cracking ice. Tira nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Then we go back to where it started." The race to Elira's Veil was a desperate flight against a collapsing past. The Chronovoid. Engine pulsed, unraveling history. Stars flickered out, not dead, but forgotten. The crater where Cryon had crashed smoothed over, Tira's footprints vanishing from the dust. Cryon flew faster, his scales blistering against the temporal friction, while Scythe surged ahead, his frost forming a crystalline barrier to slow the collapse. Tira clung to Cryon's neck, whispering, "I found you, I helped you, You stayed. Her words fought the erasure, anchoring the moment. They reached Elira's veil as reality buckled. Tira leapt from Cryan's neck, landing on the exact spot where she'd once stood barefoot. She pulled the cryobarb from her pouch, its venom long dead, and placed it on the ground. Time stuttered. Cryan roared, not in pain, but in memory, his voice a defiant echo that locked the past in place. The chronovoid engine shuddered, its casing cracking as its paradox imploded. Tira rose, facing the Ascendancy's trembling command ship. "You can't steal our story," she said, her voice carrying across the void. Cryon's flame traced a message across the sky. What is forged in love cannot be undone. The Ascendancy's remaining generals watched in horror as their weapon failed. Tira's clan broadcast the event on every frequency, ensuring the galaxy saw the moment a child and her dragons defied time itself. The chronovoid's collapse shattered the Ascendancy's dominion. Their fleets powered down, their codes corrupted by irrelevance. The galaxy didn't erupt in celebration. It bowed, not in fear, but in reverence for a bond that transcended time. Tira stood on Elira's veil, her hand on Cryan's snout, Scytha at her side, their silhouettes framed against the moon's eternal dusk. The stars watched, silent witnesses to a new truth. Haven's spark became a roaming sanctuary, a refuge for those cast aside by the Ascendancy's wars. Tira, now a beacon of hope, taught the children aboard to rebuild machines and share stories, her multi-tool a symbol of creation over destruction. Kalia designed hydroponic gardens that fed hundreds, while Thorn trained navigators to chart free routes through the expanse. Cryan and Scythe guarded the ship, their fire and frost a shield against raiders and remnants of the old empire. On the trade world of Nexara, Tira helped rebuild a school destroyed by Ascendancy raids, sharing her scavenged tools and stories of the stars. The children crafted barb-shaped pendants, hanging them in windows as a sign of defiance. Across the expanse, these symbols multiplied, barbs, flames, and frost, etched on ships and carved into cliffs, a testament to a girl who turned monsters into guardians. Cryan grew slower, his wings heavy with age, but he flew each dusk, letting Tira feel the wind across forgotten worlds. Scythe learned to hum, a sound like melting ice, and followed faithfully, his cold precision softening with each day. Tira kept the cryobarb in a glass bead, a reminder of their beginning, worn close to her heart. She never sought power, only connection, fixing broken machines, healing wounded spirits. One evening, as the sky burned gold over a reclaimed colony, Tira sat between Cryan's wings, Scythe gliding nearby. She opened her book, a worn journal filled with tales of their travels, and read aloud to the dragons and children. The words wove a tapestry of hope, each story a thread in a growing legacy. The galaxy listened, from scavengers to starfarers, their hearts stirred by a child who saw a wounded titan and chose to help. Years passed, but the story of Tira, Cryan, and Scythe endured, etched into the galaxy's soul. On every world their tale was told, not of conquest, but of choice. Tira grew, her hair still tangled, her boots still worn, but her eyes carried the same spark that had changed the stars. She built schools on forgotten moons, teaching children to dream without fear, to create without control. Cryan and Scythe guarded her, their fire and frost lighting the way for those lost in the dark. On the colony of Silvara, Tira stood before a crowd, her dragons at her side. "We're not heroes," she said, her voice clear and steady. "We're a story, a reminder that kindness can change anything." Cryan's light glowed softly, Scythe's frost shimmering in harmony. The crowd didn't cheer. They listened, as if the stars themselves were speaking through her. Tira's journal, now a collection of stories from across the expanse, became a beacon. She left copies on every world, each page a testament to connection over domination, The dragons, once weapons of war, became symbols of hope, their fire and frost guiding the lost to haven's spark. The ship grew into a floating city, its corridors filled with laughter, its gardens blooming with life. Kalia and Thorn, now leaders among the free worlds, worked with Tira to forge alliances, not through force, but through shared stories. Scavengers, traders, and even former Ascendancy pilots joined them, drawn by the promise of a galaxy where power served, not ruled. The barb pendants spread, a universal sign of defiance and hope, worn by those who believed in the Ember Child. One night, Tira stood before a new school on a reclaimed asteroid, her dragons resting nearby. She opened her journal to a blank page and dipped her fingers in Cryan's flame, beginning to write. "Our story isn't done," she whispered. Cryan rumbled, Scythe hummed, and the stars blinked softly, as if listening. The galaxy had changed, not through war, but through a bond forged in a moment of compassion. Statues rose on trade worlds, not of dragons or queens, but of Tira, barefoot and smiling, reaching for the sky, flanked by fire and frost. No new empire rose. Peace came not from fear, but from belief in a child who saw a wounded beast and chose to help, and two dragons who chose to follow her. If Tira, Cryan, and Scythe's story of courage and connection lit a spark in you, join our community. Subscribe, like, and share to keep these tales burning bright. Your support fuels our journey through the stars, bringing new stories every week. Let's write the next chapter together.